Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Marriage, Associate Editor at Woodcraft magazine, and today I'll be talking about a technique featured in issue 109, shop-made soap finish. So today I'm going to take you through the process of making this mixture, letting it set up, and applying it to your piece. The finish itself is a sort of silky, sort of satin matte effect, and it has a very sort of lovely, smooth feel. It's not the most durable finish, but it's very easy to repair and renew. And if you need to clean the surface, you just use the same mixture that you made to finish it to clean it. It is soap after all. And then you've both cleaned the surface and renewed the finish. So first things first, the recipe. We need about half and half soap to boiling water. You can play with this recipe and change your ratios to get different thicknesses of soap finish and different sort of textures for application. But what I really like to use is a 1-to-1 mixture measured by weight. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my bar of soap and turn it into soap flakes. You can purchase Castile soap flakes on the internet to skip this part, but it's always fun to grate a bar of soap. I use the larger holes on the grater. You can experiment with that as well. We'll just get started here. This is just Kirk's fragrance free. It's a couple of bucks on the internet. One thing I love about soap finish is that you can buy soap just about anywhere. Okay, that should be enough. A little of this goes a long way. I used a single bar of soap to finish an entire dining table. Today I've grated about half of a bar of soap. I recommend especially when you're first starting out, just a sliver is fine. And you'll see in a minute that this will expand quite a bit in volume. We're gonna wanna measure them by weight. So we've got a kitchen scale here. Okay, so I am going to measure the weight of this by pouring it into here. I've got about 47 grams. Zero out my scale, and then I'm going to pour 47 grams of boiling water into this measuring cup. This is a 50-50 ratio, so we're going to add as much water by weight as we added soap flakes. Once you've added the hot water to the soap, you want to start mixing really quickly. Want to get this mixed while it's still hot. It's just easier for you. So what I'm going to do is mix with a stir stick at first to try to melt as much of the soap as I can or dissolve as much of the soap as I can into the water. And once I've gotten a fair amount of the soap dissolved, maybe about half of it. If you're very patient, you can dissolve all of it first, but I tend to jump to the next step when I've got about half of it dissolved. Set my stir stick aside and bring in the whisk. I love any opportunity to chuck a whisk in a drill and use it in the shop. So when you're making a soap finish, you don't have to aerate it. You don't have to add a bunch of bubbles to it. But what I like about this method is it creates this fluffy texture to the finished set soap that I find is easier to apply. So here we go. So when do you stop? If you're familiar with cooking shows and you understand the term soft peaks, that's where I stop. It's not quite there. Keep going. That's closer to stiff peaks, but I think you get the idea, and it'll work. So, now, So the next step is to let it set up. I'm going to put it into the container that I want it to eventually live in and be stored in. So I have this glass storage container, and we will help it into there. There's still a couple lumps you'll see in mine, and if you get that, that's fine. It'll still work just fine. Now, if you're mixing this in a bowl that doesn't have a handle that you can hold on to, I strongly recommend using some sort of mat below it. Using a non-skid mat while you're mixing will help you hold on to this bowl, because we're all familiar with soapy water. It gets slippery, so use a mat if you don't have a bowl with a handle that you can grab onto like I did. Okay, so we're gonna let that sit for at least an hour. Depending on humidity and temperature in your shop, that could take less time, more time. If it's not set in an hour, just wait a little longer. Okay, so once your mixture has set up, in this case for this ratio, it takes about an hour. If it's not fully set by then, just wait a little longer. You'll know it's set when it becomes like basically a solid. It might be a bit of a soft solid, but what I always like to do is just lift by the stir stick. Sometimes this will lift the whole bowl. Sometimes you just get a chunk of soap finish, but you can tell that is a solid. If you used a different ratio, if your mix is a little bit waterier, it'll take longer to set up. It can take up as many as 24 to 36 hours. If you've waited 12 hours and it's still a liquid, just wait longer. If you want to speed it up a little bit, you can throw it in the fridge and see how that affects it. Usually that'll help it gel up a little quicker. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is put this on some wood and see how that works. I'm going to take the stir stick out, clean it off. You can see this texture at 50-50 ratio, 1-to-1, is a bit crumbly almost. With a waterier ratio, when it's set, it might be more like a hair gel consistency. So you can apply soap finish similarly to how you might apply a wax finish. You can use a cloth just dipped into the finish and spread on. You can pack this finish inside of a cloth and spread it on that way. What I like to use is a 4/0 abrasive pad and just apply it directly with this. Okay. It's super simple, super foolproof. I'm just going to suds it on here. Because it's so forgiving, I'm not even that worried about how it's applying to the other edges or sort of overflowing here and there. Just going to give it a good scrub. And then I'll just let it sit for a little bit, a few seconds, a couple minutes, while it's still pasty on the board, and then I'll wipe it off. Just using a cloth rag. Now, you can see that the soap finish has deepened the tone of this wood and sort of made it look a little bit richer. That will go away as the water evaporates. Soap finish is one of those finishes that really gives you the look of raw wood when it's set. So at this point, I'm gonna let this dry for maybe 10-15 minutes. It depends on your ratio again. If you used a waterier ratio, you're gonna have to let this board dry out more. And that's another thing to think about when you're making your ratios. The more water you add, the more water you add to the soap, the more water you're adding to your piece. So that's part of why I like to use a sort of thicker ratio. And then I'll hit it with 320 grit sandpaper and then apply another coat. I like to apply about 3 coats of this ratio. When you apply the first coat especially, it's going to raise the grain. There's a lot of water even in the thick mix. So knocking it back with 320 grit sandpaper is pretty important. And I like to do that in between every coat. And then after the last one, what I like to do is take a cotton cloth or whatever you prefer to use to buff a finish and just give it a really nice polish. You can get a orbital out here with your buffing attachments, whatever you like to do. And you can buff this up to quite a nice sheen and a really silky feel. Then you just need to reapply once a year or more frequently, depending on how much use the piece is getting. Thank you all for your time. Hope you found this technique helpful. You can get more information on this and other tips in issue 109 of Woodcraft magazine.